The way people have been talking, it almost seems like everyone expects Russell to come back, Jodie to regenerate back into David Tennant, it to be 2008 again, and for the show to instantly turn back into the cultural and ratings powerhouse that it used to be. Okay, it is possible that the only reason I enjoyed Power of the Doctor is I like being proven right about things. It makes me feel powerful. A little bit of me was dreading Power of the Doctor because, as I've made it clear in the past, Seven is my favourite Doctor and Ace is my favourite companion. And about 9 years ago I made a wish on a monkey's paw that they get brought back into New Who one day. And it has come true, but the downside to that wish obviously is Ace is brought back, but is written by Chris Chibnall. Again, I'm sure he's a lovely guy, I just don't like his writing style. I kind of had the feeling that if they were bringing back Ace and Tegan that they would get McCoy and Davison back as well and invent some sort of narrative device that explains why they both look several decades older. And I was internally cringing, just thinking, no, please, God, my favourite Doctor and companion reunited on screen for what will probably be the final time, and I'm sure it's just going to be them describing events that we can plainly see and delivering exposition. But in spite of those fears, it wasn't like that at all, and I loved the scene in the volcano where they meet each other again and reconcile their past differences. Yes, I know, I have spent pretty much my entire YouTube career poking fun of nostalgia as a concept, poking fun of people just going, oh my god, there is a thing that I recognise, therefore it is good. But this probably works on me now because you've got to remember, I am getting older. I was in my early 20s when I first started on YouTube. I'm in my early 30s now, and these simple tricks that writers who've been backed into a corner throw at you to get you to shut up and stop pointing out that they've run out of ideas probably work on me now because it is a well-known fact that your brain cells die as you get older, and therefore I'm much stupider than I used to be. Anyway, so because my mental faculties are decreasing by the minute, trying to follow whatever the hell the Power of the Doctor was going on about half the time was increasingly difficult for me, because as was obvious going in, it's given itself far too much stuff to do. It's got to have a heartfelt reunion with Ace and Tegan after several decades, inevitably crowbar the old Doctors in, give suitable departures for Yaz and Dan, have the Daleks Master and the Cybermen all doing something together that's going to end the world or something. And it's got to do all that in 90 minutes and make it feel fluid somehow. So I guess it kind of makes sense that the episode starts mid-adventure and we have a typical Yaz, Dan and the Doctor affair where they show up on a train in space being attacked by Cybemasters. And Dan makes some sort of half-jokes about a wobbly ladder, before suddenly revealing that, blimey, this adventuring stuff's a bit dangerous, innit? I'm gonna go. And then he goes home. It's a bit out of left field to chuck him out of the TARDIS in like a scene right at the start of the episode, but you know what? Given just how much stuff this episode's got to do, fair enough. So we get a bunch of paragraphs of setup dumped in our laps about this cyber planet with this wibbly-wobbly jellyfish monster that looks like a child sometimes. And this planet is being harnessed or something by the Daleks to make all the volcanoes on Earth erupt so they can end humanity. And also the Master is trying to get the Doctor to St. Petersburg in 1916 by photoshopping himself into famous paintings like The Last Supper and American Gothic, so that he can harness some of that energy so that he can regenerate into the Doctor. As clunky and horrible as much of the dialogue was, I was actually finding all the tropes from this era kind of cute at this stage, and parts of it felt kind of self-aware. The block capital yellow captions that I've joked in the past are come up with by a random year and place generator happen about every 5 minutes, and they're beyond hilarious in this one. Yes, caption, but what year is it? I want to know. Bolivia 2022? 1987? Come on, the trope is big yellow caption in random location with completely random year. Like this. Or this. Or this. Thing is though, in spite of all the stuff that Power of the Doctor has given itself to explain before anything can start happening, I was struck by just how predictable a lot of it was. Some of you who watch my channel regularly know that I did a couple of streams with JXy before the episode aired, where we opened a document and tried to write the script for the Power of the Doctor based on the trailer and who we knew was coming back. And we got the dialogue of the Ace and Tegan phone call and reunion scene spot on. We knew that they'd show up at Unit, and Tegan would be the one who'd be incredulous about the fact the Doctor hadn't called once in the last 40 years. What I didn't predict about this scene, though, was that the Doctor would have this reunion with Ace and Tegan after all these years, and then just walk out of the room.
We'll be back. Come on, Yaz.
No, you are old companions. You don't get to follow me on this week's adventure. Anyway, so this episode's historical figure, we need at least one because Doctor Who is a very educational show, there to teach children about history, is Rasputin. Yeah, the Master grows a beard and goes to St. Petersburg in 1916 and takes on the role of Rasputin for some reason. I don't know what the point of picking Rasputin is though, because we don't even play with the mythology around Rasputin and all the times he should have died but didn't, which would have been fascinating to play with given we got a Time Lord taking on this role. But again, we've got too much stuff to do, so the Master being Rasputin is just like a scene. It's like the only point of making the Master Rasputin is an excuse to play the Boney M song, and if it was just that, then yeah, alright, fair play, that song is a banger. But we don't really explore the context of the Master's plan. We don't spend that much time with him pretending to be Rasputin, and we pretty much just give Sasha free rein to jabber endless "Muhahahahaha, I am evil" typical Master lines. Fair play to Sasha though, he's giving it his all and chewing that tasty scenery, but he does kinda outperform the other villains. I was actually starting to forget that the Daleks were even in this story by the final act. You could probably take the Daleks out entirely and not really lose a whole lot, except for the fact that we got Ace back and we got to give her the baseball bat and stick her in the bomber jacket and have her beat a Dalek to death because oh my god, reference. Anyway, so the Master's plan is to harness some energy thing in order to cause a forced regeneration so that he can become the Doctor somehow. Okay, basically, him and the Doctor are in these separate booths, and it's supposed to be a case where he steals her body, but visually to me, all it looks like is the Master and the Doctor swap clothes, and apparently the clothes make him the Doctor now. I was expecting this process to happen and then for it to be some kind of Freaky Friday type thing, where the Doctor steps out of that booth and it's still Jodie, but she speaks with Sasha's voice, or Jodie puts on an evil inflection to show that she is the Master now. The Master has become the Doctor, but instead it's just Sasha dressed up as the Doctor saying, I am the Doctor now. Like, what functionally has changed here? If the Master wanted to become the Doctor, couldn't he have just killed the Doctor, or locked her up, and put her clothes on and gone around saying that he was the Doctor now, instead of having to do this whole mental regeneration scheme? He could have just stolen her clothes. Everyone knows the Doctor changes faces. No one's going to check that it's really her. It's not like the Doctor shows up at a location to save the day and they ask her for ID. Is being the Doctor just a costume? Is that what Power of the Doctor is telling us? I mean, even when the Doctor's regenerating, her clothes regenerate into David Tennant's suit. So, you know, maybe it is. Anyway, so why does the Master want to become the Doctor? Well, so he can go out into the universe and do bad things, and make it look as if the Doctor's doing bad things.
I am the Doctor, and I caused this.
I love that the Master's ultimate plan is to get the universe to cancel the Doctor. Anyway, it was at this point in the episode where I did that thing again where I had a better idea for what this episode could have done instead. How about we do a proper Freaky Friday situation where the Master gets into the Doctor's body and starts wreaking havoc on her reputation and doing terrible things. And Yaz has to come up with a plan to kill the Doctor and force her to regenerate. That would have had some serious emotional weight considering that Yaz is supposed to be in love with the Doctor, something that basically gets zero mention in this episode. I've made a point of talking about how bland I found Yaz's character over the years, but I found myself feeling this episode did her a disservice. Her best scene in this era by far is this one where the Doctor gets kidnapped by the Daleks, and Yaz panics and goes into the TARDIS, and reveals that she's been taking notes on how to fly the TARDIS. That was really cool and finally got me to appreciate Yaz for the first time. She doesn't really have a whole lot of agency when it comes to resolving the situation though, and I personally think that's a real shame. The Doctor spends all this lead up to the Master's plan talking about how dangerous forced regeneration is, but then hologram fugitive Doctor basically just shows up and goes, and now I have done a technobabble and reversed it, which is a bit of a damp squib. Surely functionally there's got to be some kind of sacrifice or a price to pay for the Master having done this forced regeneration in the first place. Otherwise I'm just watching Sasha steal her clothes for 20 minutes and then suddenly it ends. Why isn't this forced regeneration scheme connected to the regeneration that everyone knows this episode is going to end with going in? Anyway, so while all this is happening, the Doctor is sent to this metaphysical dream space thing on the edge of regeneration, where aged past incarnations of the Doctor meet up with her and warn her about, something. I can't remember, because I was just fansqueeing in this scene going, oh my god, it's the past Doctors! Characters from the before time that I remember! And fortunately the past Doctors aren't just confined to this dream space, because that would be a bit of a waste if we got the companions back and the Doctors back and they don't reunite them at any point. So they start showing up in these holograms the Doctor sends out to try and engineer it so she gets put back in her body. As obvious as it was to have Five and Tegan reunite and Tegan to essentially say, the Cybermen are here and that makes me think of Edric, and that makes me do a sad Doctor. I did find this scene genuinely touching. Davison's power as a performer really hasn't diminished one bit. Same with McCoy as I mentioned, and these two scenes are easily the highlights. I'm assuming the fact the power of the Doctor has so many moving parts is why the Sixth Doctor doesn't get nearly as much prominence as 5 and 7. But they could have had Mel in there somewhere, outside of that final scene. She is meant to be a computer genius, so she could have been useful. There's a scene where Tegan gets shoved into a room where she's supposed to do something with computers that feels like it should have been the scene where Mel reunites with hologram Sixth Doctor. And they discuss the good old times, like... So Mel, do you remember that time we fought those plant monsters with penises for faces? But yeah, this is a decent device that lets us have Davison, McCoy and Baker in the show again, even though it does lead to more direct info-dumping dialogue at the expense of visual storytelling, because the power of the Doctor desperately needs to explain where everyone is and how and why. It even feels the need to explain why Graham's randomly in this episode and Ryan's not.
Where's Ryan?
Patagonia.
Linda.
I miss me nan. But anyway, so the Doctor and the Master swap bodies back, defeat the Cybermen, and it looks like the Doctor has won, but like with the Sixth Doctor before her, she trips over, and the Master shoots her with an energy beam thing, and she starts regenerating. But she has enough time for one last trip with Yaz, where they eat ice cream on top of the Earth, which is all nice and pretty, but that's when things get weird. They just sort of start talking as if the regeneration means that Yaz is automatically going to leave. Given she's supposed to be in love with the Doctor, you'd think there'd be some sort of line from Yaz along the lines of, you're my Doctor, and I wouldn't be able to bear seeing you as anyone else. And that's the reason she leaves, but there's just nothing. Was Tasman officially ended when they had that conversation in Legend of the Sea Devils? Wow, so one scene resolves unrequited love. Wow, that was easy. Someone really should have told every writer in English literature ever. There's no mechanic that makes the companion departure work, they just sort of leave it there. Doctor, why do I have to go just because you're regenerating? I could stay with you for the next incarnation, couldn't I? Sorry, Yaz, your companion contract is up, and the bloke who writes my adventures is handing over to someone else, so, you know, sucks for you. Anyway, then Yaz gets invited to a Doctor Who companion support group, featuring Mel, Jo, Ace and Tegan. And even Ian Chesterton, one of the very first Doctor Who companions, where they share their stories of their encounters with the Doctor. Like bereaved relatives or survivors of traumatic incidents. To go even more meta, I would have gone further and gathered them in a recording studio and said, and then all the companions recorded themselves telling their stories of the Doctor and released them on CD for £40 bloody a box set. Meanwhile, Jodie goes off and regenerates into David Tennant. I've got to say her final line, tag you're it, was a great line for her to go out on because 13 has been a very childlike incarnation and that really fits for her. Anyway, overall, there is a lot to complain about with the power of the Doctor, hence the fact I've just done it. It's got very niche appeal and anyone who's unfamiliar with Ace, Tegan, all the older Doctors and doesn't have an encyclopedic knowledge of the Doctor Who universe is just going to stare at it blankly. But let's face it, the wider audience just isn't watching anymore, so who gives a shit about them? And for everyone else, there is stuff in it to like. It's probably the best episode it possibly could have been, considering everything it tries to do. And as much as I've talked about stuff that I predicted accurately, I didn't get everything right. For one thing, the words timeless child didn't get mentioned in it at all. The pocket watch from the Vanquishers gets left in the TARDIS, presumably to be forgotten about when Russell takes over. It didn't turn out that Belle and Vinder's baby turned out to be the timeless child, making Belle and Vinder the Doctor's parents, even though the conspiracy theorist in me says that they were almost certainly supposed to be that in an earlier draft at some point. I was saying prior to broadcast that the power of the Doctor was going to end up being despised by the fandom if it just doesn't bother tying up all of the loose threads of the Chibnall era, but since those loose threads were incredibly controversial, I have now realised that it was a much wiser move to just let the power of the Doctor be this massive squirty fanwang. As a finale for the 13th Doctor's era as a whole, the power of the Doctor is abysmal. But I didn't like the 13th Doctor's era as a whole anyway, and always would have preferred a massive squirty fanwag, and that is what I got. So it's not really my place to criticise it for stuff that I genuinely dislike and don't care about being absent from the runtime. I'm actually really glad the Power of the Doctor just leaves a lot of the loose threads of the Chibnall era to just sit there. I didn't want to have to hate the Power of the Doctor because hate is an exhausting emotion, and it was exhausting as I chronicled all the mistakes this era made. But it's over now. The Timeless Child is going to go back into the annals of canon along with the Doctor as half human, and we're never going to have to think about it again. I also think that now the Chibnall era is over, we're going to see fandom tend more towards my attitude that sure, hate the Timeless Child development all you want. Hate the things this era did all you want, but it's over now, and we can finally all just move on. Until of course Russell inevitably pisses everyone off again because this fandom is incapable of ever being happy.